Maria Thompson and Officer Daniels had handled countless routine calls, but nothing could have prepared them for what awaited at Harold Jenkins' quiet Elm Street home, a simple welfare check that would spiral into a dangerous confrontation, revealing secrets lurking just behind closed doors. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day that feels ordinary, almost boring, until the unexpected interrupts. Officer Maria Thompson was sitting at her desk in the local precinct reviewing paperwork when a call came through on her radio. It wasn't urgent, just a routine welfare check. A neighbor had reported that Mr. Harold Jenkins, an elderly man who lived alone on Elm Street, hadn't been seen in several days. Maria jotted down the address with a practiced hand, her mind already running through the usual steps: knock on the door, make sure he was okay, call it in, done. She had done dozens of these checks before, each one as uneventful as the last, and she braced herself for another quiet afternoon. Still, there was a small, unshakable feeling of unease, an instinct that something was different this time. Maria had learned long ago that instincts were rarely wrong in her line of work. She grabbed her coat, slung her badge across her chest, and headed out to her patrol car. The sun was warm on her shoulders, casting long shadows across the streets, and the usual sounds of children playing and distant lawnmowers filled the air. Everything seemed normal, almost too normal, and that only made her feel more alert. As she drove, she thought about Mr. Jenkins. He was a quiet man, known in the neighborhood for tending to his small garden and keeping to himself. Maria remembered seeing him on a few past welfare checks, always polite, sometimes a little forgetful, but nothing that had ever raised concern. His neighbors were friendly, but they were worried now, enough to call the police. The request was simple, but Maria knew that even simple calls could take unexpected turns. When she arrived on Elm Street, the house looked like any other. A modest, single-story home with peeling white paint, a small garden overrun with weeds, and a narrow path leading to the front door. Yet, something about it felt off. The gate was slightly open, creaking faintly in the breeze. The overgrown lawn suggested weeks of neglect, and the windows were streaked with dust, blinds drawn tightly. Maria's eyes scanned the property, noting every detail. She parked her car and stepped out, her boots crunching against the gravel. As she approached the door, she felt her pulse quicken, not in fear but in anticipation. Routine checks were usually straightforward, but the combination of the unkempt house, the open gate, and the absence of any signs of life sent a warning through her. She knocked firmly on the door, then again, letting her voice carry silence, the kind of silence that doesn't feel natural, the kind that raises questions. She tried the door handle, locked. Maria circled the house, looking for any sign that someone had been home recently. The windows remained dark and uninviting, the air around the house still except for the faint rustle of leaves. Her attention caught on a smell drifting faintly from the backyard, metallic and sharp, unlike anything she could immediately identify. She frowned, radioing her partner for backup. The call had been routine, but something in her gut told her this was no ordinary welfare check. She took a deep breath and stood at the edge of the porch, trying to steady her racing thoughts. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet, and every instinct she had as an officer screamed that today, this simple visit could turn into something far more serious. Maria moved cautiously around the side of the house, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The faint metallic smell she had noticed grew stronger, twisting through the air like an uninvited warning. The siding of the house was cracked and faded, and the windows, though covered in dusty blinds, reflected the sunlight in strange angles, making it difficult to see inside. She tapped lightly on one of the windows, hoping for any response. Silence answered her. Her hand brushed over the doorframe, checking for signs of forced entry or recent movement, but nothing appeared out of place, at least at first glance. The garden that wrapped around the house had been abandoned long ago, weeds overtaking the flower beds, vines creeping along the walls. A small bird darted through the branches, startled by Maria's presence, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. It was an ordinary scene on the surface, but the quietness of the house, the lack of footprints, the stillness of the air, it all felt wrong. She signaled to Officer Daniels, who had just arrived, and they moved together toward the back, careful to make as little noise as possible. The back gate hung on one hinge, swaying slightly as if pushed by an invisible hand. As they entered the backyard, the smell intensified. It was strange, sharp, and almost sweet at the same time, a combination Maria couldn't immediately place. She felt the hair on her arms stand up. The grass was long and damp underfoot, and she noticed faint drag marks in the mud near the back door, almost as if someone had been moved or had dragged something heavy across the yard. She crouched down, inspecting the marks. They were recent. Her heart started to beat faster, the unease she had felt since the call now settling firmly in her chest. The back door, like the front, was locked. Maria and Daniels exchanged a glance, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Routine checks didn't usually end like this. Maria's mind raced through possibilities: an accident, a medical emergency, maybe someone hiding. She tried the door handle again, pressing her ear to the wood to listen. From inside came nothing but silence, the kind of silence that seemed to press against the walls, thick and heavy. She circled the house again, inspecting the windows from different angles, trying to see any hint of movement inside. That was when she noticed a faint flicker of light coming from a narrow gap in the curtains of what appeared to be a small room off the living area. The flicker wasn't consistent. It moved slightly, as if someone or something was shifting within. Maria felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't just a simple welfare check anymore. Her instincts, sharpened over years on the force, screamed that danger was close, hidden just behind the walls. Carefully, she radioed for backup, her voice steady despite the tension. Officer Daniels stayed close, eyes scanning the yard, hands near their holsters. Every step they took was deliberate, measured, as they prepared to enter the house. Maria glanced at the windows one last time. The flicker of light had stopped, leaving only the shadowy interior visible through the blinds. A chill ran down her spine as she realized that whoever or whatever was inside, they had been waiting, watching, perhaps even knowing the officers were coming. The house, once ordinary and quiet, now felt like a trap, holding secrets that were ready to emerge the moment the door was opened. With backup on the way, Maria and Daniels decided they had no choice but to enter the house. The side window they had discovered earlier was old and slightly ajar, the lock rusted from years of neglect. Daniels gave a careful push and the window creaked open, allowing them to slip inside. The air hit them immediately, stale, heavy, and carrying that same sharp, metallic smell from the backyard. Maria's instinct screamed that this was no ordinary scene. The living room greeted them with chaos. Papers were scattered across the floor as if a storm had passed through. A chair lay on its side, broken, and a vase had shattered into sharp fragments. The faint sunlight coming through the dusty windows highlighted the disarray, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the walls. It looked like someone had left in a hurry, or perhaps struggled within the space. Maria's eyes scanned every corner, every piece of furniture, every shadow. She knew better than to assume anything was as it seemed. They moved cautiously down the hallway, footsteps soft on the worn carpet. The smell grew stronger, and Maria realized it was coming from a room at the far end of the house. She gestured to Daniels, and they approached together, their movements deliberate, their senses heightened. The door to the small room was partially hidden behind a bookshelf, almost like someone had intentionally tried to conceal it. Maria's heart pounded as she pushed the door open, revealing the hidden space behind it. Inside, they found a man in his 40s sitting on the floor, surrounded by belongings that clearly didn't belong to him. His eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, the room seemed frozen in time. This wasn't a stranger passing through, this was someone who had been living there, quietly, undetected. Maria quickly assessed the situation. The man's hands were empty, but his body tensed as if ready to bolt. She kept her voice calm but firm, instructing him to stay put. The relief that he had not yet acted violently was tempered by the knowledge that he could at any moment. As Maria looked closer, she realized the extent of the deception. The man had been using the elderly homeowner's space as a hideout, taking advantage of Mr. Jenkins' reclusive nature. Among scattered papers, they discovered documents, tools, and even surveillance equipment. It became clear that he had been observing the house for weeks, perhaps months. The elderly man had been completely unaware his home transformed into a secret lair. Maria's stomach tightened. What had begun as a simple welfare check had turned into the discovery of a dangerous criminal hiding in plain sight. Daniels kept a steady watch at the doorway while Maria searched for further clues. Photographs and notebooks revealed a pattern burglary, tracking careful planning. It was chilling how meticulous the man had been, how long he had evaded detection. Maria's mind raced, trying to piece together how the stranger had been able to remain hidden for so long without drawing suspicion. The quiet life of Mr. Jenkins had been violated in ways unimaginable, and the officers were now standing in the heart of it. In that room, the ordinary had dissolved completely. What had seemed like a routine visit had become a confrontation with a hidden threat, and Maria understood that the danger was far from over. The man's presence explained the strange smells, the overgrown lawn, the flickering light, but it also raised countless questions. Who else might have been involved? How much longer had this been going on? Every second felt loaded with tension, every shadow a potential risk, as the officers realized the true depth of the nightmare that had been lurking quietly behind the walls. The moment Maria and Daniels thought they had control of the situation, the stranger made a sudden, desperate move. In an instant, he lunged toward the back door, pushing furniture aside in a frantic attempt to escape. Maria reacted immediately, stepping in front of him, her body tense, training kicking in as she blocked his path. Daniels moved quickly to cover another exit, but the chaos of the moment was disorienting. The man's eyes were wild, his movements erratic, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. It was then that Maria noticed a subtle outline in the living room floor, partially obscured by a rug. A trapdoor, cleverly hidden. She didn't hesitate. She barked an instruction to hold position, signaling to Daniels and the stranger alike. The metal handle of the door was cold under her fingers, and as she lifted it, a wave of musty air rose from the darkness below. The basement beneath the house was small, cramped, and smelled of damp earth mixed with chemicals. It was immediately clear this space had been used for something more than storage. As Maria shone her flashlight downward, the beam revealed piles of items that made her stomach tighten. Stacks of stolen goods, electronics, and documents filled the space, along with containers that held unknown substances. Wiring ran along the walls, leading two small cameras positioned throughout the main floor, some pointed toward windows, others toward doors. The stranger had been monitoring not just the elderly man, but the entire property with calculated precision. Every move Maria had made, every step Daniels had taken, could have been watched through those lenses. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. The officers methodically began to secure the basement, keeping the man under control while gathering evidence. As they worked, it became clear that this was not a random squatter or petty thief. This was someone who had planned extensively, someone who had prepared for months to remain hidden and undetected. The room contained notebooks filled with observations, schedules of the elderly man's routines, and lists of items to take. The meticulousness of it all was chilling, a stark reminder of the lengths people could go to when driven by desperation or obsession. Maria's mind raced through the implications. The welfare check, a simple act of neighborly concern, had interrupted a potentially much more dangerous scenario. The elderly man had unknowingly been at the center of a calculated scheme, one that could have escalated far beyond the theft of belongings. Every second that the officers had delayed could have put Mr. Jenkins at serious risk. The hidden basement, the cameras, the stolen property, it all pointed to a criminal who had taken advantage of trust and isolation, exploiting the quiet life of someone who had no idea he was being watched. By the time backup arrived, the stranger was restrained, the evidence cataloged, and the basement secured. The officers finally had a moment to breathe, though the tension lingered. The house, which had once appeared ordinary and unremarkable, had revealed itself to be a carefully orchestrated trap. Maria understood the gravity of the situation. What seemed like a routine welfare check had uncovered not only a dangerous criminal, but also a meticulously hidden operation that could have had devastating consequences. Every piece of evidence, every hidden corner of the house, underscored how fragile safety could be, even in the most familiar places. The aftermath of that afternoon left a lasting impression on everyone involved. The stranger was arrested and taken into custody, his carefully constructed life of secrecy dismantled piece by piece. Officer Maria Thompson and Danielle stood in the living room of the house, now stripped of its hidden menace, and tried to process what had just happened. The elderly man, Mr. Harold Jenkins, was safe but visibly shaken. His routine life suddenly intersected with danger in a way he could never have imagined. Neighbors began to gather outside the house once the news spread, drawn by curiosity and concern. Many expressed disbelief that such a situation could unfold in their quiet, seemingly ordinary street. To them, the house had always been just another part of the neighborhood backdrop, a modest home with a garden that had slowly fallen into neglect. None of them had suspected the layers of danger hidden behind the closed doors and drawn blinds. The realization that someone had been living there undetected, observing, and planning left a profound sense of unease throughout the community. For Maria and Danielle's, the experience reinforced lessons that they had learned over years on the force but that were impossible to fully anticipate until lived. What had started as a routine welfare check had evolved into a tense, high-stakes encounter that required vigilance, quick thinking, and careful coordination. Every detail, the overgrown lawn, the ajar gate, the faint metallic smell, had been a clue pointing to the extraordinary circumstances they were about to face. The officers understood, perhaps better than anyone else, how ordinary appearances could hide extraordinary danger. As the investigation continued, the depth of the stranger's activities became increasingly apparent. The stolen goods recovered from the basement were traced to a series of burglaries across the state. The surveillance equipment revealed the meticulous care with which he had monitored Mr. Jenkins' daily life. Notebooks detailing his observations painted a chilling picture of calculated intrusion and obsession. Law enforcement agencies marveled at how well he had remained hidden for so long, and yet it had been the simple act of a neighbor calling for a welfare check that unraveled his secret life. Mr. Jenkins slowly returned to his routines, but the sense of vulnerability lingered. The quiet house that had once been his sanctuary now felt different, more exposed, more fragile. Even small sounds that he had once ignored now carried a weight of uncertainty. For Maria and Danielle's, the case became a touchstone for the unpredictable nature of police work. The knowledge that a routine call could turn into a potentially dangerous encounter was something they carried forward, a reminder of both the fragility of safety and the impact of their vigilance. The story spread beyond the neighborhood, capturing attention in local news reports. It became a cautionary tale about the hidden dangers that can exist behind ordinary doors and the crucial role of community and law enforcement in protecting those who may be unaware of the risks around them. The welfare check that had seemed so routine at first had ultimately prevented harm, exposing a criminal operation that might otherwise have gone undetected. The incident remained a defining moment, a vivid example of how courage, attention to detail, and a willingness to act can turn an ordinary day into one that saves lives and uncovers truths hidden in plain sight.